Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. A reported US request for Polish Patriot air defense systems, swiftly rejected by Warsaw, raises deeper questions about how alliances actually function under pressure. Are priorities shifting inside NATO, and what does this mean for transatlantic unity? Well, we're joined by Andrzej Dybczyński. He's the author of International Alliances and an expert on security and alliances to explore the stakes in this circumstance. Mr. Dybczyński, welcome to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So here we have two NATO countries. One is carrying out a major military operation in the Middle East, and it's asking another for help. And yet that's not forthcoming. What does this tell you about the relationship within the NATO alliance?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be so prompt in answering such a request coming from the United States, because we have one problem with Donald Trump. So the problem is that you fall asleep to one plan and you wake up to another. So definitely any answer given to such a request should be given calmly, should be strategically crafted, and definitely should not be prompt. But if we go deeper into how alliances function and what does it tell us about NATO itself, well, I would say that differences in national interests are very, very natural to alliances, and we shouldn't be surprised. The problem is that quite often in Poland we think about alliances in a very, very mythical way. Alliances are nothing but just the tool, just the measure for national security policy. And this is nothing surprising that the United States treat NATO, especially now with Donald Trump in power, as a method, as a measure to perform national policy.
But if alliances are only a matter of, measuring or a technique of measuring national policy, then how powerful is Article 5? I mean, everyone's used to saying, well, we're a member of NATO, we can ask, for Article 5 to be exploited, and we're protected. But you're suggesting perhaps it's not that straightforward.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if you allow me to do this, but I would like to ask you one question. What is your guess? What is your pure guess? How many alliances in human history were actually honored by the allies? Do you have any guess on that?
Actually, I don't normally do this, but the way you ask the question suggests 0.
15%, 1-5. Do not be mistaken. 15%. Only 15% in alliance history were actually honored. 85% not. More importantly, from the perspective of your question about the Article 5, is what is the power what is the power of the legal arrangements behind the alliances? And this is not. The alliances, the alliance credibility, the alliance ability to act is not based on the formal arrangement, on the Article 5, 15, 50, or whatever you call it. The alliance credibility, the alliance ability to operate is based on 3 completely different factors. This is political will, this is military capability, and this is credibility. And again, let's stop with myths. Alliances do not work because they are signed treaties. They work if there is a political will, military strength, and credibility and trust between the allies.
But we see, if we move out of the military realm for a second, we see that in the commercial realm, alliances work quite well. Take the European Union, for example.
Yes, of course. But the problem is that if you talk about the trade, there is not a survival of a state at the stake. And this is very, very interesting comment you made, because most of the literature on the alliances is the literature on economic alliances. I studied it, but paradoxically, all you know about economic alliances, all you know about trade alliances, and trade relationship between states is very, very little relevant, of very, very little relevance to how the military or political alliances function. And we should admit that if we want to seriously talk about the alliances, about NATO, about what Poland should do in the situation we are facing right now, or we might face in the future.
Okay, so what do alliances depend upon? You mentioned three, areas that they rely on: political will, military capability, and so on. But what about trust?
That's a very, very interesting question, and thank you for that. So, first of all, trust is not a strategy, and trust must be backed by capability. Without capability, trust is just the dependency. If we just trust our ally, if we just trust the United States, France in 1939, the UK, we are fully dependent. So, of course, trust is needed in the alliance, but trust will not replace the real capabilities. Another very, very important observation, if you study the history of the alliances, and NATO perfectly fits to that scheme. Alliances are never unconditional insurance policy, and only strong allies might expect help from the allies. So you never help a weak ally. Only those who are strong might expect help. That's all about what I can say about trust. It's nice, it's needed, but trust, hope is not a strategy within the alliance. And this is why Poland, in this situation, should be focused on building our own capabilities.
Understood, but nonetheless, Poland on its own is going to have a challenge protecting the whole of Europe's eastern flank. There is a need for alliances in order to do that. Now, if we're following the assumption that Trump is pulling the US out of the alliance in terms of what he believes the US's obligations are, then what options does Europe have in general, and Poland in particular, for replacing that kind of support?
Well, I would phrase this much more carefully. I definitely would be very far from saying that Trump policy leads to NATO collapse, but then definitely Trump raises the risk for NATO. He is very chaotic, very unpredictable, and very transactional, unfortunately in short term being transactional. And that undermines the alliance credibility and the alliance consistency. So the question is, what is a mitigation plan for that? I would say that such a mitigation plan should be composed of 4 elements. Of course, first of all, building on national strength. Always, this is the foundation for national security. Alliances is just the supplement. Secondly, we should develop a European pillar of NATO. And I'm very far from saying that they can replace NATO or the United States, but they can give us at least a kind of an alternative. Thirdly, we should build regional and bilateral security agreements. And fourthly, we as Poland should stay very credible, very strategically relevant, very well-armed ally to others.
Good advice, I'm sure, Mr. Dybczyński. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there, but thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us. Have a good evening.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Bye-bye. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.